From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is OpenLine.
Well, Thursday evening, everyone. Rhori Johnston here in the OpenLine chair. Good to be back from a long weekend away, and we are tackling, as usual, an important topic here tonight. We want to help some people tonight. We have a lot of information to share. We suggest maybe getting a pen and paper to write down some information as we share it with you. And as always, we encourage you to call in 737+. Call in with your comments and your questions. And our guest tonight, we welcome Lisa McCrady, who is no stranger to NewsChannel 5+. She's the Director of Communications for such an important group, the Metro Action Commission. So I'll start with a very broad question. Tell us, for those, we hear about the MAC, the Metro Action Commission, all the time. What does it do? What's the purpose?
So our purpose is, in very simplistic terms, is to allow families to leave much better than how they came to us, regardless of if they're coming for their children to go through our preschool program, if they're needing help with their utility or rent payments or mortgage payments, our adult education program. Our goal is to eliminate poverty in Nashville and Davidson County. And so we feel by doing that is through education, employment, and safeguarding or securing basic necessities.
Sure.
And so our organization's been around since 1964. I haven't been there that long, but yeah, we're changing lives. We like to believe that we are, and again, leaving families much better than how they came to us.
So, are you part of Metro Nashville government, as in you get your budget through that process?
We do.
Yeah.
We are a city department. We have about 350 plus team members, 8 locations throughout the city of Nashville. So yeah, we're part of city government.
How challenging has it been, Lisa, the past few years? We know one of the reasons Mayor Cooper got into that position is because he really ran on fiscal responsibility. We did all the stories, despite Nashville being on the rise, we had some financial problems, and the mayor has repeatedly had to ask, at least the last few years, ask departments to cut back. And for a group like Metro Action Commission, which is so hugely important and can make a difference, any small cutback can really hurt.
Yeah, our city department, or our city mayor, Mayor Cooper, has gone through. He knows about our departments, and so he knows that any cuts, as you said earlier, would just be very challenging. But he's very mindful of the services that we all provide, and so with that in mind, we have weathered the storm along with the departments and just trying to make sure we do the best with what we have. Our budget is largely federal funding, and so we have done pretty well as far as cuts. We have had some, but not as deep as some of the other departments, and so it has been a challenge for all of us. But we're very grateful that we're on the rebound.
Yes,
and as a city.
We're going to talk in a little bit later, the bulk of this, about some exciting news, some new funding coming in, and some programs that have been set up to help people and also streamline and make the process easier. But let's back up a little bit and talk about this past year and the pandemic. We know the toll it's taken on so many people. How do people know how to even contact you? Are you networked with maybe nonprofits and churches and other groups? How did we get people in touch to say, hey, Metro Action Commission might be able to help?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate to have lifelong, I believe, partnerships with several organizations, really with all organizations in the city that provide the supports and resources to particularly families with low incomes. And so we believe, or we know, that any minor or any slight challenge to them, it can be catastrophic, where someone with more resources, it may not be felt as much. What's different about this particular year, however, is that Nashville has really suffered what we believe is kind of a 1-2 punch. You know, we were coming out of the tornado this time last year and then going right into a full-fledged pandemic, of which we didn't have a whole lot of information early on. And so we built on the relationships that we had, particularly with the tornado. Many of us, including our agency, was displaced for a period of time. And so we all had to really network together to make sure that we knew how customers can get to us and how we can get customers to them. And then how to make sure that our service is continued. Because even though our buildings were damaged or in some cases not even existent anymore, families still needed us. And so we needed to make sure we banded together to make sure that we continue to provide a high level of service and support to the families here in Davidson County.
Yeah, what a double whammy it was. And then we get into the pandemic, and maybe people who already were challenged as far as finding, maybe had jobs, but they weren't good paying jobs and they were looking to move up. Well, everything seemed to just shut down, and we know how high our unemployment rate spiked. So now you've got people who are struggling. They barely have anything in the bank. They've got to pay bills. They've got to pay their rent. They've got to pay their utilities. I know that Congress acted, and you'll have to kind of guide me on this, whether it was federal or state, these mandates to basically say, hey, you can't kick people out of their homes for 6 months or whatever. Tell us where we are with that rule that was in place, because I know a lot of places it's expired, right?
Yeah, in some places, but not here in Davidson. So it doesn't necessarily expire. I'm sorry, for our state. It doesn't necessarily expire until March 31. However, if a person was already, let's say, into the eviction process and they had worked out something and then the pandemic hit and they couldn't fulfill the obligation that they had already gone to court to see, those residents potentially were also being evicted. However, if your court case had not been seen and it was just pending, it hadn't been before the judge, then that's where the moratorium pretty much were safeguarding those individuals. Right.
Because, you know, eviction in a time like this, too, I mean, a lot of people, then they're homeless. There is literally nowhere else for them to go, right?
Absolutely. In addition to that, the landlords are also suffering as well. You know, a lot about the residents, but the landlords, they themselves were hurting too, especially if the property that they had was still mortgaged, because they were using to cover the mortgages. I mean, to cover the mortgage. And
that's a great point that you bring up, because there's two sides. A lot of people can try to make landlords out as the bad guy, but they're trying to pay a mortgage. It's an investment. They don't want to kick people out or evict people, but they need some money coming in. So the help needs to be on both levels. Right.
So and because of that, many of our landlords have been very, very willing and very actually happy that this program exists. We've done a lot of pre-work. Once we found out that Davidson County was going to be awarded this money, we began in February, right on the heels of us knowing, meeting with them, with landlords, meeting with the legal side, so with the court system and with our Metro County clerk and with nonprofits and community-based organizations, because what we needed to make sure is that they understood the funding and what it would and wouldn't do. This particular funding is strictly for rent, but you also had a population of individuals who also had mortgages that were past due. We also knew that because of programs that we already run that cover rent and mortgages, that only having the opportunity to help with 1 month or 3 or 6 months, that still was just a drop in the bucket compared to what they actually needed. We also saw a bigger population. So the longer we went into this pandemic, the more people started to be impacted. So now you're dealing with families who had that reserve, that's now depleted. Yes. Had been prepared to go the long haul, but the long haul got longer, Yeah, absolutely. And so you have more and more people who are impacted.
I buried the lead. What we're talking about is this $20.8 million grant, basically, that Nashville applied for. It's a federal grant. HOPE, it's called Housing Opportunity Partnerships and Employment Program. It's going to help renters impacted by COVID to catch up on past due payments that are behind as much as 12 months, and also there's some utility help as well. We're going to talk about that and take a couple of phone calls. We have to take our first break, everybody. We'll be back with Lisa McCrady right after this.